to the Applying to Psychology Doctoral Programs 101 for Students of Color, featuring Dr. Tiffany Townsend. My name is Desa Daniel. I am the Div45 student representative, and I am partnering with Farzana, who is also a part of Div45 student committee, and she's also part of the chair committee. Joelle could not be with us today, but she is the chair of CARED, which is part of APAGS, which is the Committee for Advances of Racial and Ethnic Diversity. And overall, our goal was to just be able to offer a way to talk to students about applying to doctoral programs. We know that's currently going on for people. This is a high stress time for many of us. But I also just wanted to give students more resources about what we have to offer as Div45 and as CARED. And so luckily, Dr. Townsend was very nice to take some time out of her busy life to speak to us today. So I am going to remind you all again that I did mute you all so that we can hear Dr. Townsend clearly throughout the presentation. She has said that she is willing to share her presentation slides with us. And what I will do is I will email that out with the video link to the recording of this event. If you are ready to answer, or I'm sorry, if you're ready to ask questions throughout this presentation, on the right-hand side of the web screen, you can click on the chat box. You'll be able to bring up the chat right now. My name is in there, including my email address. Also, Div45 students have a Facebook page, so you're more than welcome to join that page for more information of events like this. But that's also where you'll ask your questions. So without further ado, Farzana?
All right, thanks, Dessa. Hi, everyone. My name is Farzana Salim. As Dessa said, I am one of the committee members on Div45's committee, and recently rotating off the CARED committee. And so I just wanted to go ahead and introduce our speaker for today. Her name is Dr. Tiffany Townsend. Dr. Townsend received her doctorate in clinical psychology from George Washington University, and she's currently the Senior Director of the Office of Ethnic Minority Affairs for the American Psychological Association. In this capacity, she directs 2 professional mentoring programs, the cyber mentoring program funded by NIMH, as well as the ProDIGs program funded by APA Science Directorate, their academic enhancement initiative. Before joining APA, Dr. Townsend served as a full-time faculty member in the Department of Psychiatry at Georgetown University's Medical Center, and prior to that in the Department of Psychiatry Psychology at Penn State University. Dr. Townsend's scholarly work involves the implementation of community-based research and prevention programs to decrease health and mental health disparities among ethnic minority women, children, and families. She has received most of her funding to support HIV prevention research among youth populations of color. And in particular, she served as the PI on 4 federally funded grants and the co-investigator on 2 others, totaling close to $6 million. So as you all know, Dr. Townsend is very accomplished and has a lot of experience. And so we were hoping that today you guys can be able to not only hear the information that she has to provide, but be able to ask questions at the end of the presentation. So I will now turn it over to Dr. Townsend for her presentation.
Thank you, Farzana, and thank you both, Farzana and Dessa, for the invitation. As Farzana knows, she can't get rid of me. She was an intern here in our office and now is a very accomplished graduate student at my alma mater, and so I see her and work with her frequently. And so I was happy to work with the group to get this information. I can talk, so I have a structured presentation to make sure I don't overtalk. One thing you do know is you don't want to give a former professor the mic, right? Because they may never give it back. So I have a short kind of presentation to get to the major points, but I think what we want to do is spend more time answering questions, and hopefully I can help address any concerns or questions that you may have about this application process. I have to say that I think it's become a lot more competitive and a lot more difficult than it was even when I applied. And as young as I am, it was a while ago. So I think things have changed, but as a former faculty member, I have a sense from the other side now of what this is like and what faculty are looking for. And so that's some of the information that I'm going to share today. So as Farzana mentioned, I am currently the Senior Director of the Office of Ethnic Minority Affairs here at APA. But I wanted to, I can't, it's not moving, hold on. I'm trying to move it, it's not moving.
Maybe if you unshare it and reshare it.
You said unshare and then reshare?
Yeah.
Okay.
Because it worked a second ago.
Now share again?
Yeah.
Okay. Uh-oh. Okay, there we go. Okay, great. So I wanted to just briefly kind of give you a sense of my journey, because I think kind of understanding my career path would give you a better sense of the perspective that I have and where I'm coming from. And it also helps you kind of understand that although my career kind of looks linear, it wasn't. And so I think that I have had a lot of experiences that have shaped the way in which I think my career has unfolded. And I think that there are some lessons that I have learned that I want to share with you so you don't have to experience some of the things that I did. So I went to Spelman College, which is a historically Black college and university, but it's a small liberal arts school. And at the time when I went to Spelman, we had a very small psychology department. We only had 4 full-time faculty members in that department. And doing research, because it's a teaching institution, the faculty weren't doing a whole lot of research. So getting research experience as an undergrad was difficult. And I think that that kind of shaped the path that I took. If you look at my high school yearbook, believe it or not, in my senior year, it asks, what will you be doing? And I said clinical psychologist. Now that would seem that my path was very linear, but as you will see, it was not. So even though I kind of had a sense of what I wanted to do, I think I did not have as strong a sense of as I think I needed to at the time, and I think it's helpful for you. And so we're going to kind of talk about that. So I went straight from Spelman College to GW in a PhD doctoral clinical psychology program, and I was the youngest in my class. Did not have any time in between, which has its pluses and minuses. And then while I was at graduate school, my advisor, at the time, GW looks very different than it used to look. So Farzana is blessed to have a very diverse department. But when I was a graduate student at GW, it was when psychology was still dominated by older white men. And so most of the faculty in our department were older white men. And I had the one African-American woman faculty member in the whole department was my advisor, who said, I am leaving GW in this next year. So if you want to graduate under me, I suggest you get your dissertation and you finish. And I finished. She didn't have to say that but one time. So I was done and got through my program in 5 years, which I think now is not the norm anymore, even though it's a 5-year program. That's typically not the norm. And I can say that there were lots of things I didn't learn and had to learn once I got out of the program. So I don't know that I would have done it the same. I was very young when I got out and got my first job on faculty at Penn State University. I was 26 years old, and I was the only Black faculty member in a department of 50. And so that was my first experience. I was there for 8 years and then was on faculty in the Department of Psychiatry at Georgetown in a medical school, which is a very different environment than a psychology department. And then from there, I became the senior director here at the American Psychological Association. So I've had experiences as a graduate student, experiences on faculty in the psych department, experience in a medical school, which is a soft money, a very different environment, and now as an administrator at a membership organization. So I think I've had, like I said, a varied kind of career, and I think I've had such experiences that I think will give me some information that I can impart to you as to the do's and don'ts, and maybe some choices that you can do better and make better choices than I made so that your career path is a little smoother. I'm happy where I am, and we'll kind of talk about that, but I think that there were some steps that I took that in hindsight I could have done a little differently. So what am I going to talk about today? Today, I just want to talk about some of the things that you need to do in order to prepare yourself to apply for graduate school, but also to prepare yourself to develop the type of career that you really want. And I think it's important to be intentional. And I think even though when you're an undergrad, the whole goal is to try to explore and to really experience everything that you can in order to understand what you want for your career, I do think that even in the midst of that exploration, once you decide that you want to go to graduate school, you need to be strategic and intentional in how you go about planning for your graduate career, because it is a career choice. And I think you need to think of it as a career choice. One thing that I think is important for everyone to remember is that you will be in school for at least 4 or 5 years. Really, honestly, 4 to 8 years of your life will be in graduate school. So it really needs to be something that you are passionate about, that this is a career choice for you that really makes your heart pound, that really makes your juices flow, because this is something that you'll be doing for the next chapter of your life. 5 to 8 years is a long time. And so if you're not passionate about it, then some of the hoops that you have to go through in graduate school that we all have to go through become just hoops and not something for a greater good. So really think about what you're passionate about and excited about, and try to go after a career that will help you address that passion. I say that because, like I said, from a high school student, I said I wanted to be a clinical psychologist, but that was because that's the only thing I knew about psychology. I thought if you wanted to be a psychologist, then you're a clinician. That's what you do. I wasn't exposed to the many flavors of psychology. And so I didn't know that there were different ways in which you could be a psychologist. If I had known and been exposed to the different disciplines, I may have been a social psychologist. I may have been more applied. I'm happy I have my clinical degree now, but given the work that I'm doing, I think I could have been just as happy as a social psychologist. So know what your passion is and make sure that you're intentional about your choices. Create a vision for your career in life. What do you see yourself doing in 5 years? Once you get that degree, what is it that you want to do? Do you want to put your shingle out and do just clinical work? Do you want to do research? Do you want to teach? There are different environments in which you can do all of those things, but you really have to have a sense and a vision of who you will be in the next 5 to 10 years. But be flexible. Once you get into graduate school, you're going to be exposed to a lot of different experiences that will shape who you will become. And you have to avail yourself to those opportunities and experiences and be open to how it will shape you. I say that to say, when I first came in, I wanted to be a clinical psychologist, right? That was my vision. And it was based on a very narrow understanding of what a psychologist was and a very narrow exposure to psychology. And so I wanted to hang out my shingle and practice. And although I do that now, and I don't do it much now, but I used to have a side practice and I was happy there, I realized that once I got into graduate school and started to do research, I liked research. I enjoyed it, and that was more of my passion. Had I been inflexible in what my view was, I wouldn't have availed myself to those experiences and to potentially being a faculty member, because that was not what I had planned to do when I first got in. So be flexible. Now, once you've decided that graduate school is where you want to be, you need to start this process early and be organized. And when I say start early, I mean, think about if you're a senior, you needed to be thinking about the fact that you're applying to graduate school as a sophomore. That may seem really early, but the reason why you want to think that early is because in your junior year, you should be applying for research assistantships. You should be developing relationships with your faculty so they know who you are and so that they can write letters for you and really write good letters, right? As a faculty member, I wrote letters and there was a clear difference between someone I knew, someone I taught, and someone I really knew well. And the letters kind of reflected that. And so you really have to start developing those relationships early. You have to start thinking about the experiences you need to round out your application. And you really need to start thinking about doing the research for each of the programs that you might be interested in. That takes time. So you want to start early and you want to be organized. The other thing that you want to do is find a mentor or a coach in your department. I can't tell you how many times I have seen applications where it was clear that no one else looked at that application, where the applicant was the only person who put eyes on that application because there were typos, it was just not presented in the best way, and you want to always put your best foot forward. So you want to have a mentor and a coach, and I kind of talk about the difference between the two. A mentor is someone who really kind of helps you craft your career. But a coach is someone who you reach out to for a specific reason. And so you may just have someone who's not going to be your career mentor, but may be able to help you with this application process. Who can look at the application with you, can help you process the different choices that you want to make for your career and whether this school is a good fit. But you need to have someone that you can go to help you through that process. Now, they're not going to hold your hand, but they can at least review your application. They can at least help you answer some questions or give you some advice. So you want to get that person. Now, once you have decided, yes, I'm going to graduate school, I have a sense of the type of psychologist I want to be, then you want to start researching and selecting programs. You want to think about what's the program emphasis? Is this a heavily scientific, empirical research program? Then that will be good if you want to be a faculty member. But if you want to be a clinician, then that's probably not the best fit. So you want to look at the program emphasis. You want to look at kind of what their graduates do. That's key, right? So I went to GW, which at the time, although it's not now, Farzana, but at the time when I went, it was very much a clinical program. They said scientist practitioner, but if you looked at the graduates, most of them were clinicians. That's why you want to look at the graduates, because the graduates will tell you the emphasis of the program. So they may say scientist practitioner model, but there was a heavy emphasis in my program on clinical work, which at the time was perfect because that's what I wanted to be. But then I connected with the social psychologist in the department and a whole new world opened up to me. So you want to be clear about what the program emphasis is, where your career is headed, at least in your mind right now, so that you can make good choices about the program. The faculty, you want to research what they're doing. What kind of work do they do? What area do they do their research? How many students do they have? How well do their students do, right? So you want to do that kind of research. Will you get financial support? This is huge because a lot of clinical programs, the professional programs, don't provide support. And sometimes you're coming out of these programs with $100,000, $200,000 worth of student loans. Can you afford that? So you need to be really thoughtful about what financial support is provided, what you can realistically afford, and make choices based on that. And don't just kick that decision off until later, right? So you want to think about that now. And if that means that you have to wait to get into a program, so you get in, you apply to a program that gives funding, but you don't get in, but you get into another program that doesn't provide funding, and you say, well, I'm gonna just go to this program because I wanna go. Think about that decision carefully, right? because you want to make sure that you're not setting yourself up to have huge loans down the road. So I'm not giving any decisions about what choice you need to make. I'm just saying be thoughtful about that decision. What type of training do they provide, and is it appropriate for this vision that you have for your career? That's why it's important for you to be thoughtful about what you see you can realistically see yourself doing in the next 5 or 10 years. And is there a personal fit? And I say that not just about the training, not just about the education and the financial support, all of that is important, but where is it located? Who's around you? What do the students look like? Because you have to be comfortable and you have to feel like you can live there for 5 years. And if you are concerned at all about any of those things, you need to think very clearly about that. I was on faculty at Penn State, that was in State College, which is in the middle of Pennsylvania. It's very homogenous. I was the only Black faculty member. And although they accepted a fair amount of students of color, the students felt isolated because of the location. So you really do have to think about that, because if you're unhappy, you're not going to be very productive. So you have to be realistic about where you can live. And there's some people who put their head down, did what they had to do, and they got out and it was okay. If you're that type of person, then that's fine. But be realistic and honest with yourself about what you need in order to be successful. I think we kind of talked about that. Select programs that will provide the best preparation for your career and vision. And now then the spreadsheet and the organized part, that's probably because I'm from another era, right? So we did have spreadsheets and checklists, and you guys probably don't do that anymore. But what that was for was to get a sense of the programs that you're interested in. What are their due dates? What are their deadlines? What are they requiring? Not all programs require the same information. So you want to have a sense of what everyone is requiring so that you can have that information and you're ready, and that you can send it to who are you asking to write letters you need to know so that you can follow up and make sure those letters are in. You definitely don't want to have an incomplete package because someone else didn't turn in their information. So you want to be as organized as you possibly can. Okay, so once you have applied and you now are at a space where they are interested in you based on what they've seen in your application and they want you to come out for an interview, how do you prepare for the interview? You want to know, particularly the faculty that you said you want to work with, right? So you want to think about what faculty are doing as far as the research, where you see the best fit as far as your interests and the research of the faculty, and where you could see yourself working in a lab. So be familiar with all the research of that faculty member, and also faculty members that are connected, so that you can make you have informed questions and have a very interesting discussion. What faculty members are looking for when they sit down with you is, can I see this person in the program with me? Can I see this person in my class? Can I see this person working in my lab? And if you are engaged, if you're clearly someone who does their homework, then this is someone that they can see having as a part of their community. If you sit there and you don't have any questions to ask, you haven't done any research, you don't know what they do, then that's not someone that they could see as a part of their community. So you want to be familiar with their research. Be prepared to articulate not just how this program can help you, but how you can add to the lab of that program. Now that may sound presumptuous, but I think it's important. So yes, you're an undergrad at the time, or maybe you're a master's level student going into a doctoral program, but they still want to see that you're going to be a good addition to their lab or addition to their academic environment. And so you want to think about that. Why should this program invite you to be a part of their community? What do you add? What do you bring to the table? Think about that and be prepared to articulate that, because the information should be bi-directional. It shouldn't just be you asking questions about how this department can help you. It really should be you discussing how you can contribute to this community and environment, how you fit in, how you see this program as a part of creating who you're wanting to become. They want to see someone who's kind of thought those things through. Prepare questions in advance. So don't try to think of questions at the time. Sometimes you can. So just have some fallback questions. There are going to be questions that come to you as you're having a discussion with one of the faculty members, and that's great. But there's sometimes when you're going to be at a loss or you're going to be nervous, and so you need to have questions that are right there that you can just ask when a question doesn't come to you. Because what you do not want to do is when people say, well, do you have any questions, for you to say, no, I think everybody's answered all my questions. Don't ever say that, because I don't care if everyone has answered your question. You want to know the information from that person. That shows that you are engaged and you're interested and that you are a critical thinker, that you're not just accepting what anyone says, that you're getting information from lots of sources to help you make your decision. So sometimes that means you just have some ready-made pan questions, and that's okay. But you have information that you could share and that folks know that you're engaged in the process. Interview do's and don'ts. And I like this part because there's some things that I have seen on interviews that have shocked me, right? So I've had students who have come in who, like I said, would say, oh, I don't have any more questions. But I've had some more egregious kind of things happen. So I've had a student, and when I say, well, let me go through and then I'll give stories for each one of these things. Show interest, ask questions. Definitely want to do that. Communicate your assessment of your fit to everyone, even if it's not a faculty member you see yourself working with. Make sure that you talk to them about what you see as important and how you see yourself fitting into that environment and your contribution. Remain positive at all times. Impression management is important. Don't ever think they're not evaluating you, because they are evaluating you all the time. So just keep that in mind. And I say that to say the other piece, don't be too comfortable. Now it's going to be collegial, it's going to be positive, it's going to be friendly, because of course no one wants to go in and feel grilled. So we're psychologists, we're not going to create a, undesirable environment. It's going to be fun, right? Well, not fun. It's not going to be fun necessarily, but it will be positive. But that does not mean that you should feel too comfortable, that you should totally let your guard down. I had a student who came in and was doing racist jokes. And I think he thought because he did work he was not a person of color, but he did a lot of work with communities of color, that he thought that some of his jokes would be taken as satire and that we would understand that he was being, kind of, like I said, like it was satirical, but it was offensive because I didn't know him. And so you should never be too comfortable. I was shocked that he even felt comfortable enough to say some of the jokes that he said. And it wasn't just me, it was a lot of the faculty of color. And I was like, oh, this guy, really? So, and then when we read his letters, one of his recommenders made a very veiled reference to his sense of humor. And so we got a sense after the interview that that's what they were talking about. But don't be too comfortable. Don't ignore the graduate students. Ask the graduate students questions. Be very serious about the information you get from the graduate students. Take what they say because they have a lot of information and they're coming from a different perspective. And don't think that they're not evaluating you too, because in our department, they also would give information to faculty about who they thought was a good fit. So you want to keep that in mind. You don't ever want to say anything to a graduate student that you would not want the faculty member to hear, because you'll be surprised at what comes back to the faculty members, okay? Be positive. Don't start trashing I know that sounds like, of course, but we've heard people trashing the department to graduate students because they didn't think it was going to come back, and it did. So be very careful about what you say and how you say certain things. And don't go in and just talk about yourself. Ask questions of everyone. Be engaged. Look interested. Be interested. So what are faculty looking for when they are interviewing you? They want someone who's creative and flexible, independent worker, they want someone who's going to contribute to the work of their lab. They want you to have thought about your research and thought about your career choice and have some vision. They want to feel like you're a good fit, that you can come in and kind of get to work and fit in with the rest of their students and with their program. And they want someone who's grounded and that shows initiative. What are all of those things? All of those things is that you are communicating to that faculty member that you don't need a whole lot of hand-holding. So faculty members tend to have several students that they're advising. And so if they have a student that's very needy, that needs a lot of attention, and it's difficult for them to really show the attention that person needs and also show the attention to maybe their 5 or 6 other students that they have at the same time. So they have to kind of know that, yes, you need direction. Of course you do. But that if I give you direction, that you have the ability to take that and move. You have the ability to take that and contribute to our department. You have the ability to kind of think and ask questions and be flexible so that you can get what you need from that department. You can use the structure and use the guidance from your faculty members, but that you're not going to be too difficult for them to help get you through the program. And so I hope that's clear. And we have a brochure on kind of applying to graduate school on our website. So this is the link. And I guess when Farzana and Dessa send that out to you, you guys can click on that and it'll give you that guidebook that's online and gives you some more tips. It's an older guidebook, so some of it may not be relevant because this was well before the information technology age and we didn't have the internet and all of that. So some of these tips may not be as accurate, but I think it's a good starting point. And if you need to reach me directly, my email address is right there. So I will stop so that we can have more of a discussion and I can answer any questions that you have. Okay, so I should stop sharing, right?
Yep, you can stop sharing. Great. Thank you, Dr. Townsend. That was really, really helpful. And I was even reflecting on my experience as you were talking. So thank you for sharing that. So at this point, you guys, we can open it up for questions. We will have everyone type their questions in the text box. So if you if you're on the computer and you hover your mouse over the screen, you'll see at the bottom, there's an icon that says chat. So if you click on that icon, a text box should open up to the right-hand side of your screen. And in there at the bottom, you should be able to type in questions. If you're on the phone and you don't have access to the text box, when there is a moment of pause, you can interject and just say, I have a question, and just state your name, and then I'll write that down and then get to the questions in the order that they come in on the chat box or on the phone. So we do have one question that's come in right now from Curtis. He has said, do publications buffer poor GRE scores? Also, do publications or GRE scores hold greater weight?
Okay. I think that's a great question. And I will say that there are many programs now that are starting to move away from GRE scores as being a key indicator of how you'll function in graduate school. So, I mean, the GRE is really just supposed to be a reflection of whether you could do graduate work. But we know that there are some folks who just traditionally don't do well on multiple choice standardized tests. And I think slowly but surely departments are starting to recognize that and appreciate that. So there are some programs that are actually just throwing it out. Actually at California, Berkeley, they're thinking about just doing away with that as a requirement. So, so I would say if there are, I would say the whole package is what the faculty member looks at. If you have other indications of the fact that you can do graduate level work and can do research, people look at that. So publications are important, right? You don't have to have publications in order to well, at least I didn't. You guys are ahead of us. I didn't have any publications when I applied to graduate school, but I am seeing now that you guys are coming in with 4 and 5 publications at undergrad, and I'm just floored. But so it used to be a period where you didn't really have to have them. Now I think it really does show that you have the ability to connect with the team. You have the understanding of what that research process is. So I think publications are great. Now, your question of whether it would nullify GREs, I think what it is really people are starting to just not see GRE as the big indicator that it used to be. So I think people are moving away from that. I wouldn't say publications nullifies. I just think that GREs are kind of going out of favor. I'm not saying that all programs don't, all programs are moving away, because that's not true. I think that people are starting to appreciate that they need to look at the fuller picture.
Gotcha. Thank you. A follow-up to that, which it looks like is from Donette, is what holds the best weight in the ideal applicant? So again, kind of getting at, do you think the personal statement weighs more, the clinical experience, the research? It sounds like earlier you were saying a combination, but in regards to those three areas, would you say that one is more important than the other from a faculty member's perspective?
I think it depends on the program you're applying to. If you're applying to a Research One institution, I think publications hold a lot of weight. If you're applying to a clinical program, maybe a PsyD program where your clinical training is really key, then I think having some previous clinical experience will hold weight. So it depends on the program that you're applying to. I don't think there's a blanket answer for that. I think that, like I said, programs are starting to look at the bigger picture, but I think the important piece is that there's a fit between who you are and what the program can shape you to be. And so if they can see that from your experiences that you would be a good fit for their program, then they'll pick you. So whatever helps them to feel like you would fit into that program. And like I said, a Research One institution, research does that. Publications, presentations at conferences, those are big things. And so if you have that when you're applying to a doctoral program to a Research One institution, I think that carries a lot of weight. But that's not to say all programs value that the same.
Got it. Another question is, what is the best way for students to ask faculty to be mentors and or write a letter of recommendation?
So that's a more complicated answer. I think it depends on what your relationship is with the faculty member, right? So I think the biggest thing that you want to do is to try to work in that person's lab before you try to get them to write letters so let me step back. If you're in a class with a faculty member and you say you've been in one class or two classes and you just want them to write you a recommendation letter as a student in their class, they may very well do it. I've done many. Understand though, if they don't have any connection with you other than that class, then the letter is going to reflect that. And I think programs really look at those letters. They want to get a sense of who this person is, and they're looking for the recommender to provide some sense and picture of who this person is. So the better letters are clearly from people who know you better. So that means if you need to have someone who knows you better than a teacher, then you need to start putting yourself out there and developing those relationships. And the best way to do that is to offer and volunteer your time in someone's lab. You do that first. Work with them, help them get to know you, develop that relationship, and then it's easier to ask those questions because you know the person. So I think most faculty members know that writing recommendation letters are a part of the job. And so we're willing to do it. And if you're willing to ask me for a letter and I don't know you very well, then I guess you expect that the letter is going to reflect that. So I never write a bad letter. If you ask me to write a letter and I say yes, it's going to be a fairly positive letter. It's going to be a positive letter. It's going to be positive. But there are degrees of positive, right? And so someone that I know better, you can clearly see that I know that person much better in the way I write this letter than someone that I just taught once or twice in a class. So you want to think about that. What kind of letter do you need? Do you have a lot of people who know you really well and you just need that extra letter to fill out your application? Then having a letter from a teacher who just knows you from class may be okay. But if you only have letters from teachers who only know you from class, then you're going to be missing out on a huge piece of your application. You need to have some bricks when you're building your house, right? And bricks, when it comes to recommendation letters, would be those letters from people who know you well, who can say, I strongly recommend this person, I urge you, and there's some passion behind that letter, that recommendation, because they know you. So I guess the long answer to your question is develop those relationships. Spend time in their lab, work with them in meaningful, substantive ways, and then it's easier for you to ask them to do other things because you've already built that relationship. Does that make sense? Okay.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. We have another question from Devon. He says, as far as interviews, what does the committee generally look like? Will your faculty of interest likely be on the committee? I think he might be referring to during the interview process. What will that look like?
I can't speak to every program because I think every program does it differently. So I've been in 2 different programs, and the experience that I've had is that there were individual interviews, right? So there wasn't kind of a panel or committee that did interviews. It was more of you had scheduled interviews with the folks that you were interested in, and potentially some other faculty members that may also be in that department would also interview you. But I have heard that there are folks that have interviews where it's more of a panel. And that's different than my experience, so I can't really speak to that. So what I can just say is from my experience, it's definitely been the faculty members you identified as someone that you want to work with. That's clearly someone that you're going to talk with and interview with. And you will potentially also interview with faculty members that are also in that division or area, because they want to know, they'll likely have you in classes. They want to know whether you would be someone who would fit into the program. I would say at Penn State, for example, we did not have an apprenticeship model. So even though you may have applied to work with a certain person, we accepted people into the program, not into a lab. So it was really important that you interviewed with everyone who was in that division, because they felt like we're all inviting you into this program, not just the person that you're going to work with. And we wanted to be flexible enough that if once you started to work, say you came in to work with me, but felt like your work is not really where I want to go, I want to work with, Professor X, that we all had a hand in making that decision. So we'd be okay if you decided to go and work with Professor X. So you want to be prepared to interview with the person that you plan to work with, but also be prepared to interview with the other faculty in that department or division.
Great. Camille has here, what do you believe the pros and cons may be for entering a doctoral program with a master's degree?
So I think it's different now, right? Like, I think there's actually a lot of pros to having a master's degree, because I think you're more mature, you kind of understand what graduate programs are. You have a sense of what it takes in order to be successful. And so you're just at a different space, I think, as far as understanding that. And I think because graduate programs have become more competitive, I think that the master's level applicants just tend to have more experiences, and they have thought about their career vision. They're a little bit more mature in figuring out how they connect. And so I think that it helps in that sense. It does not help in the sense that you're going to get through your doctoral program faster. I don't think that happens. Unfortunately, what tends to happen is the prerequisites that you need in doctoral programs often are not the same as the ones you get in your master's program. So it's not like you'll have this 2 years that you did in your master's and all of those courses will then transfer to your doctoral program and you'll be starting at year 3. That's typically not how it happens. You might have 1 or 2 classes that get transferred, but most likely you'll be starting in the beginning with the other students. So it just means that you will be starting with the other students as far as your coursework, but you'll be a couple of steps ahead because you've done some of this groundwork before. So you're more mature, you're ready, you're just in a different space, and you're really ready to articulate what you can get from this program and how you can fit in. And so you just look like a stronger applicant. So I think that's where the advantage comes in.
Great. Kat has a question. She says, what advice do you have for someone who has more research experience but wants to go the clinical route? How would the applicant market themselves in this
How
case?
would what? I'm sorry.
How would the applicant market themselves in the case that they have more research experience, but they're really interested in going more of the clinical route?
I think, I don't know, I guess it's so funny because I'm coming from the perspective of someone who's primarily been at Research One institutions, in which case having research is never a problem. So I guess it just depends on the program you're going into. I can honestly say the programs that I've worked in as a faculty member, if you came in with research, I don't care if you wanted to do clinical work, that was valued. So it depends on the program you're applying to. I think, I think I'm not the best person to answer that because I have such an experience with Research One institutions that I just don't see that as a problem. And externships and experiences for you to get your clinical work. And so you'll get that experience. I think what you want to do when you're crafting your letters, when you're crafting your personal statement and you're having your recommenders craft their letters, is kind of talk about how this research experience has helped inform some of the applied work that you want to do with direct work with participants and with clients and in the communities, and how that work is informed by your research. So you can kind of just talk about the research as a foundation and how you want to use that to inform the applied work that you'll do. And you could do that in your personal statement. Your recommenders can say the same thing and really kind of structure that experience. But again, I'm probably biased. I just don't think having research experience is ever a bad thing. So.
Thanks. A follow-up question to that is, what would you recommend for students who actually have more of a clinical interest but are applying to programs that focus on research? What is your advice for navigating that and how to talk about it in the statement and in the interview? Or a caveat is someone who's interested in the balance between both the research and practice.
I think I kind of go back to really making sure there's a fit between what you want to do and what your program is going to train you to do. So if you're if you're applying to a heavily research-focused program and you want to do clinical work, then that's probably not the best fit. So, I mean, I think there are ways in which you can restructure your application to make it sound like you want to focus on research, and you could potentially get in, but are you going to be happy? Is it going to train you and structure you and really kind of craft the career that you're hoping to get? I think you really need to be thoughtful. There are so many programs that are more clinically focused. You have to ask your question, why are you trying to fit this round peg into this square hole? If you don't want to do research, then maybe a research-based program is not for you. If for whatever reason you decide it is for me, though, I've got to be here, then there are ways in which you can kind of talk about your research experiences and then talk about how you really want to use your research to inform your practice and that you feel both are really important, and really talk about that scientist practitioner model.
Gotcha. Claire says, thank you for all of the wonderful advice. How important is it to contact potential faculty advisors at the graduate school you're applying to and build a relationship with them during the application process?
I think that's hard. I think once you get to the application process, it's going to be difficult to build a relationship because at that point, they already know that that's what you're trying to do. Right? And so there are going to be other people trying to do the same thing. I think it's important that you reach out to them and you let them know you're interested in their work and really so that you can be on their radar. But I think it's going to be hard for you to build a relationship with them at that point. I think that relationship building will either happen well before in your professional organizations, where you've had maybe contact with them in another setting, or what will happen after once you get into the program. I think during the application process, they're really focused on evaluation of students and applications, and you'd be surprised at how many applications these programs get. I remember just in our program, our clinical program, we would get 300 applications. So it's you know, that's a daunting process, and so to try to start developing the relationship during that process, I don't think it's going to be very fruitful. I think what you want to do is definitely reach out, let them know I'm interested in your work. I'm very excited about the prospect of working with you. I'm sending in an application, just wanted you to know, and I'm available if there are any questions that you may have about my application. And I would just kind of leave it at that and let the faculty member reach out if they want to, and then really try to follow up with developing that relationship once you get there. Once you do the interview, you can kind of try to start planting the seeds of wanting to develop more of a relationship during the interview, and then really wait for that to sprout once you get to the department. But I don't think it's practical to try to develop a relationship during the application process.
All right. Another question.
Some folks may have a different perspective.
Gotcha. And I would imagine too that faculty are very busy too, so to be able to develop that, you know, relationship maybe in the way that some students are envisioning might just be hard in general.
Yeah, yeah.
Another question is, how difficult or should it be addressed if I'm a different ethnic background from the research population that the mentor is studying? And if so, should that be addressed in my application? Should I bring that up in the interview process?
Oh, that's a really good question. I've had students who come in who wanted to work with me, who've done research with African American populations before, but who were not African American. And I think that was something that was clear in the interview, so it didn't need to be stated. But I think how it was addressed is they talked about how they felt like they were still at a place where they could work with that community because of the work they've done in the past. So as opposed to kind of pointing it out as a problem, they just kind of talked about, here's the work I've done with African American youth in the past. This is why I want to work with this community, and really just try to focus and emphasize their previous experience and their comfort with that community, and why they still want to work with that community. I think that's most important. I mean, I think the faculty member wants to get a sense that if I have you in my lab or you're doing interviews out in the community, that you're not going to alienate my participants. So that's what you want to get across to them, that I'm comfortable, I've done this before, I know I may look different, but this is kind of how I've handled that. And you may not have to draw the point and make a really sharp point of the fact that I have a different racial group, but instead emphasize the comfort level that you feel working with that community by talking about your previous experiences.
Great. Tram wanted to know the difference between a counseling and psychology doctoral program, and maybe on that note, just briefly addressing the difference between the PsyD and PhD.
Okay, so the PsyD and PhD I think is easier, so we'll do that, because I'm not sure I understand the question. So the counseling program between counseling and clinical, or?
Counseling and clinical PhD programs, what's the difference?
Okay, so the counseling and clinical PhD programs, the difference is pretty much the emphasis of where you would go and do your work. So in a counseling program, you're going to be in settings where you're really dealing with, well, in theory, you're dealing with more everyday issues, or you're dealing with kind of normal development and things like that. So you're in settings like in schools, you're in higher education settings, whereas the clinical degree is really focused more on being able to address more severe kind of issues, and you're thinking about abnormal development and pathology in a more focused kind of way than maybe in counseling. And so you're going to be in hospitals, and you could also be in counseling centers, and you could also be in higher education and settings like that. You are less likely to see a counseling PhD in like a hospital setting than than you would a clinical. So you probably see a clinical person in a psychiatry department in a hospital, and counseling tend to be in the counseling centers at the university. So that's kind of the difference. And then the PhD versus PsyD is very clear. PhD is a research degree. And so there's going to be more emphasis on research, even though it's a clinical program and you're going to get that clinical experience. There's also a real clear emphasis on also learning the research aspect, learning how to do a research program. There are some PsyD programs that have a research focus, but they're fewer. So for instance, the PsyD program at Rutgers is an applied psych program, and it has community, and it's a PsyD, but they have a heavy emphasis on research, and they have a real dissertation where it requires a lot of their own kind of groundwork and research. And then some PsyD programs, although you have a dissertation that you'll have to do, it could be kind of a case study, or it could be more clinically focused and doesn't have to have the same rigor that some PhD dissertation programs require. So I think it's the difference in, do you want to, when you go out, just do clinical work and that's it? You have no interest in being a researcher or a faculty member. Now, you could be, as a PsyD, you could certainly work at a hospital, you could certainly work at a university teaching, but you're less likely to do a lot of heavy research. I hope that's clear.
Yeah. Thank you. There's 3 more questions, and I just want to be mindful of our time because we only have a few more minutes left. We'll see if Dr. Townsend can get to these last 3, and I think 2 of them are kind of related. So Daniel's asking, what advice would you have for someone who does not have a background in counseling with little research or clinical experience? So I think Daniel might be asking, what if you're interested in pursuing this degree, but you really don't have that research or clinical experience? What advice would you give?
So is this person coming from undergrad, or they have a master's degree or some other experiences?
I'm not sure. Daniel, if you can unmute yourself, feel free to try to do that and clarify.
Okay, well.
Can you briefly answer for both master's and PhD?
I'm sorry?
Can you clarify for both? So is there a benefit for undergrad if you don't have that background versus if you're coming out of a master's program?
I think if you're coming out of a master's program, I think there's some level of expectation that as an undergrad, you're not going to have a whole lot of experiences, right? So if you're coming as an undergrad student applying to a doctoral program and your experiences are in a different area and you don't have a whole lot of research experience, I think people kind of understand, well, they're coming from undergrad. But I think when you come from a master's program, the expectation is that you have done some groundwork in your area. So I think the expectation is higher. And so I think it's a little bit more difficult, but I don't think it's impossible. I think you then have to kind of talk about why you decided to shift. What are some of the experiences that you've had that makes you want to now move in this direction? How do you see yourself fitting in that direction? Really kind of explaining how your experiences, although not completely related, certainly do still provide some type of groundwork for what you want to do. So you still have to kind of show and create a story. So people have to read your application and it has to make sense. If they're reading it and they still don't understand how in the world you got to a doctoral psychology program, then you've done something wrong. So even if you don't have all the experiences that you think you still should be able to tell the story that justifies why you're going into a doctoral program.
Gotcha. I think that you kind of answered Camille's question as well. What advice do you have for individuals who are not strong in research, but would like to strengthen their skills?
So one thing that I have to say is, and this is going to be my last point, this is not a race. So if you come out of undergrad and you don't have all the experiences, or you come to a master's program and you don't have all the experiences, it's okay to take a minute, take a breath, and get some experience. Right? You don't have to apply because that's the next step. You don't have to apply to graduate school right away. You can take a year. You can go off and do a research assistantship in a lab. You can either volunteer in a lab or get a paid research assistantship position. Go to NIH, try to, if you're in the DC area, and try to increase your exposure to research. They have paid internship positions in some cases. So there are ways in which you can build up your CV. So if you don't have some of those things, or you find that there are holes in your CV, then take the time to fill those holes so that you're a better applicant, a stronger applicant when you actually do apply.
Great. So we are at our 3 o'clock hour, and we had someone ask, would this be available afterwards? I think Dessa just provided the Facebook link to the Division 45 website, and she will be sending out a follow-up link with the YouTube posting or the video from today, and probably with the contact information of Dr. Townsend, if she's okay with that, myself and Dessa. If you guys had follow-up questions, you could feel free to shoot them to us, and maybe Dessa and I could be your first point of contact unless you had specific faculty-related questions for Dr. Townsend. And Dr. Townsend, you're getting some thank yous on the chat. So on behalf of all the students here and Division 45 and CARE, thank you so much for taking the time.
Thank you for having me. This was fun.
Good
luck to everyone. Okay.
Thank you.
Take care.
Alrighty, bye-bye.